The conference chamber on Zenith Prime Station stretched 300 meters across, filled with representatives from 47 different species. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some stood on legs, others floated in specialized tanks. But they all shared one thing in common today. They were trying not to laugh at the humans. Ambassador Helen Cross stood at the central podium, her voice steady despite the whispers echoing through the translation systems. She had just volunteered Earth's newest warship to join the defense fleet against the Void Reavers, a pirate armada that had been terrorizing the Outer Rim trade routes for months. The Kryn representative, Admiral Zekthor, leaned forward in his seat. His scaled face twisted into what might have been a smile. Ambassador Cross, we appreciate Earth's enthusiasm. But perhaps you don't understand the nature of this threat. The Reavers field over 300 combat vessels. They strike fast and disappear faster. Helen kept her expression neutral. We understand perfectly, Admiral. That's why we're offering the HSS Defiant and her crew. A ripple of barely concealed amusement spread through the chamber. The Vel Collective's representative made a chittering sound that the translator rendered as polite coughing, though everyone knew it was laughter. Zekthor's eyes gleamed. Tell me, Ambassador, what is your vessel's maximum velocity in normal space? Helen had known this question would come. 0.15 C, Admiral. The chamber erupted. Some species laughed openly now. Others exchanged glances that needed no translation. 0.15 C meant the human ship could reach 15% of light speed. Most civilian cargo haulers moved faster than that. The Kryn warships could hit 0.8 C. Even the old Sorel frigates, considered outdated by modern standards, cruised at 0.6 C. I see, Zekthor said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. And your weapons range? Effective range varies by system, Helen replied. Our primary armament has significant reach. I'm sure it does. Zekthor waved a clawed hand dismissively. Very well. The Council accepts Earth's generous offer. The Defiant will be assigned to the reserve formation, rear position. He'll be protecting the supply ships, which meant they'd be nowhere near the actual fighting. Helen understood the subtext perfectly, but she simply nodded. Thank you, Admiral. Captain Wright will report to the fleet coordinator within the hour. As she left the podium, Helen caught fragments of conversation through the translation feeds. Can't believe they actually showed up with that antique. Humans still think this is atmospheric combat. Better than nothing. I suppose, barely. 3 decks below the conference chamber. Captain Daniel Wright watched the proceedings on a monitor in the Defiance ready room. Lieutenant Amy Sanders stood beside him, her jaw tight with anger. They're treating us like a joke, sir, she said. Daniel turned off the monitor. They are, and we're going to let them. Sir? Amy, what's the first rule of any fight? She blinked, then recited from memory. Never let your opponent know your real capabilities. Exactly. Daniel stood and walked to the viewport. Outside, dozens of alien warships hung in space like jewels. They were beautiful in their way, all curves and flowing lines built for speed and elegance. The Defiant looked like a brick by comparison, all hard angles and functional plating. But Daniel knew something those elegant ships didn't. Speed wasn't everything. Commander Kyle Porter entered the ready room, a data pad in hand. Sir, we've received our position in the fleet formation. Rear guard as expected. We'll be holding station with the medical ships and supply carriers. Good, Daniel said. That gives us excellent sensor coverage of the entire battlefield. Kyle raised an eyebrow. You're planning something. I'm planning to do exactly what we were designed to do. Daniel took the data pad and scrolled through the fleet composition. 200 ships total, mostly fast attack cruisers and medium destroyers. The Kryn Imperium provided the heavy battleships, massive vessels bristling with plasma cannons and particle beams. Amy moved closer to the viewport. Sir, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why did Command really send us? They knew we'd be laughed at. They knew we'd be put in the back. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Because someone has to be willing to do what others won't. These species, they've been fighting each other for thousands of years. They've developed rules, protocols, honor codes. War has become predictable for them. Almost civilized. And we're not civilized? Kyle asked. We're new. We don't have thousands of years of tradition telling us how a proper space battle should look. Daniel turned from the viewport. We have desperation and creativity. And right now, that might be worth more than speed. The next day, the Defiant departed Zenith Prime along with the rest of the fleet. The journey to the Kesson corridor would take 3 days at FTL speeds. For 3 days, Daniel and his crew prepared while the rest of the galaxy made jokes at their expense. On the galactic networks, human military capabilities became entertainment. Comedy shows featured sketches of human ships trying to catch pirates while moving in slow motion. Memes showed Earth vessels with turtle shells photoshopped onto them. One particularly popular video game let players pilot the legendary human warship, which moved so slowly that even asteroids could outrun it. The crew of the Defiant saw these jokes. They said nothing, but Daniel could see the tension building. During dinner in the officers' mess, Amy stabbed at her food with more force than necessary. "They think we're useless," she said. "Good," Daniel replied. "Let them think that, but sir, we're not." The hammer is our secret," Daniel interrupted, "and it stays that way until we need it." "Amy, I know this is hard, but trust me, when the time comes, no one will be laughing." Kyle nodded slowly. "The Admiral's playing the long game. We're not here to look good. We're here to win." On the 3rd day, the fleet dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Kesson corridor. The formation spread out across millions of kilometers of space. The fast interceptors took positions on the flanks, ready to chase down any raiders who tried to slip past. The heavy cruisers formed the center line, their weapons charged and ready. And in the back, barely visible on the tactical displays, the HSS Defiant settled into position with the supply ships. Admiral Zekthor's voice came over the fleet channel. "All ships, battle stations. Intelligence suggests the Reavers will strike within 48 hours. Stay alert, stay ready, and for those in the rear, try to stay awake." Laughter rippled through the channel. Daniel smiled slightly and turned to his crew. "You heard the Admiral. Battle stations. Amy, begin pre-flight checks on all weapon systems." "Kyle, I want constant telemetry from the forward elements. If a Reaver ship so much as twitches, I want to know about it." "Yes, sir," they replied in unison. As the crew moved to their stations, Daniel settled into his command chair. Through the viewport, he could see the distant stars and the faint shimmer of other ships' engines. Somewhere out there, the Reavers were coming, and somewhere in the bowels of his ship, the hammer waited. The galaxy had laughed at the slow human ship. Soon they would learn why speed didn't matter when you only needed to fire once. The Defiant drifted silently in formation, her crew running system checks while they waited for the battle that intelligence promised was coming. In her quarters, Lieutenant Amy Sanders reviewed the weapon protocols for the 100th time, her fingers tracing over the technical specifications that had taken humanity 15 years to develop. She remembered the day she first learned about the hammer. It was during her final year at the Naval Academy, in a classified briefing that only the top weapons students received. The instructor, a grizzled officer named Colonel Steve Barton, had started the lecture with a simple question. "Why do we lose?" The students had looked at each other confused. Earth hadn't fought any wars since joining the Galactic Council. "I'll tell you why," Barton continued. "We lose because we're slow. We lose because our shields are weak. We lose because every other species out there has had 10,000 years to perfect their technology, and we've had barely 50. In a fair fight, we die. So here's the real question. How do we make sure we never fight fair?" That lecture had changed everything for Amy. It revealed a program that most of humanity didn't know existed. A project that began the moment Earth realized just how outclassed they were. 20 years ago, Admiral Frank Hughes had attended his first galactic war game as an observer. He watched the alien fleets dance through space in formations that looked almost like a ballet. Ships darted in and out, exchanging fire at ranges that seemed impossibly close by human standards. Energy weapons lit up the darkness, shields flared and sparked, and when ships were disabled, rescue teams moved in to save the crews. It was warfare, but it was warfare with rules. Gentlemen's rules, someone had called them. You disabled the enemy. You captured prisoners. You ransomed them back. Actual deaths were relatively rare. The goal was to win, yes, but to win elegantly. Admiral Hughes had returned to Earth and written a report that scared the hell out of everyone who read it. His conclusion was simple. Humanity couldn't compete in that kind of warfare. They were too slow, too weak, too new. Any conflict would end with human ships disabled and human crews taken prisoner at best, or destroyed at worst if they faced enemies less honorable than the council members. But Hughes also noted something interesting. The aliens fought the way they did because they could afford to. Their shields could take punishment. Their speed let them retreat when overwhelmed. Their weapons were precise enough to disable without destroying. They had the luxury of mercy. Humanity didn't have that luxury. So Hughes proposed something radical. If Earth couldn't win by the galactic rules, then Earth needed to change the game entirely. The project was called Doctrine of Necessity, and it brought together the best minds humanity had. General Paul Mason led the strategic development. Dr. Lisa Grant headed the physics team. They were given one directive: create a weapon system that would make humanity's weaknesses irrelevant. Amy's instructor had shown them the early concepts. Missiles were considered, but point defense systems could shoot them down. Energy weapons required power that human reactors couldn't generate efficiently. Plasma weapons had range limitations. Everything they tried, the aliens had already developed counters for. Then someone suggested going backwards. Way backwards. What's the oldest weapon in human history? Dr. Grant had asked her team. A rock, someone answered. Exactly, a rock, thrown really, really hard. The physics were beautiful in their simplicity. Kinetic energy equals 1/2 mass times velocity squared. But at relativistic speeds, things got interesting. Very interesting. An object moving at 90% light speed didn't just hit hard. It hit with the force of a small nuclear weapon, and there was no defense against it that the aliens had developed. Their shields were designed for energy weapons, for heat and electromagnetic radiation. A solid object moving at relativistic speeds would pass through shields like they weren't even there. By the time the energy from the impact dispersed, the target would already be vapor. The challenge was building a weapon that could accelerate a projectile to those speeds without tearing itself apart. It took 8 years of failures, 3 destroyed test ships, and the complete redesign of human reactor technology. Amy remembered seeing the footage of the first successful test. A target drone the size of a cruiser sitting in empty space. The test ship fired, and for 3 seconds nothing seemed to happen. Then the drone simply ceased to exist, replaced by an expanding sphere of plasma. The scientists had cheered. The military officers had fallen silent because they understood what they'd created. This wasn't a weapon that disabled enemy ships. This wasn't warfare with gentlemen's rules. This was a weapon designed purely to kill, and it was terrifyingly effective at its job. The lecture at the academy had covered the ethics extensively. You will carry the hammer, Colonel Barton had told them, and you will hope every single day that you never have to use it. Because the moment you fire, you're not disabling an enemy ship. You're killing everyone on board instantly. There's no time for escape pods, no chance for surrender, no mercy. Just death. Amy had asked the obvious question. Then why build it? Barton's answer had been blunt. Because the galaxy is a dangerous place, and there are threats out there that won't show us mercy either. The hammer exists so that when we face something that wants to exterminate us, we can hit back hard enough to make them stop. It's a deterrent. And like all deterrents, it only works if people believe we'll use it. Now, sitting in her quarters on the Defiant, Amy pulled up the technical specifications. The weapon system took up nearly a third of the ship. Massive electromagnetic rails ran through the spine of the vessel, powered by reactors that normally supplied the entire ship's energy needs. The projectile itself was simple. Tungsten carbide, dense and durable, wrapped in ablative shielding that would burn away during acceleration. Charging the weapon took 15 minutes and required shutting down non-essential systems throughout the ship. The rails could only fire 3 times before the stress degraded them beyond safety limits. After that, the Defiant would need a complete refit, and the targeting was the hardest part. The projectile would be moving at 0.92 c, nearly the speed of light. At that velocity, relativity became a significant factor. Time dilation, length contraction, the slight curve of space around massive objects, all of it had to be calculated perfectly or the shot would miss. That's why Amy had spent 3 years studying ballistic mathematics. That's why she ran firing simulations every day. Because if the moment came, if the order was given, she needed to be absolutely certain that her calculations were perfect. A chime interrupted her thoughts. The intercom crackled to life with Commander Kyle Porter's voice. Amy, Captain wants you in the ready room. She closed the files and headed down the corridor. The ship hummed around her, a familiar sound that she'd grown to love during her years of service. The Defiant might not be fast or pretty, but she was solid, reliable, built to take a hit and keep fighting. Captain Daniel Wright was waiting in the ready room with Kyle. A tactical display showed the fleet formation, with the Defiant's position highlighted in the rear. "Amy," Daniel said, "I want to talk about firing solutions." She nodded and pulled up her work on the display. "I've been running scenarios based on the Reavers' known tactics. They favor hit-and-run attacks, high-speed passes. That makes them difficult targets for the hammer." "What about stationary targets?" Daniel asked. Amy frowned. "Stationary would be ideal, but the Reavers don't sit still. That's their whole strategy. Humor me. If you had to hit a stationary target the size of a heavy cruiser at 800,000 kilometers, could you do it?" She worked through the math in her head. "Yes, sir. At that range with a non-moving target, I'm confident I could hit within 10 meters of the aim point." Daniel exchanged a glance with Kyle. "Good, because I don't think the Reavers are going to hit us with just fast raiders. Intelligence might be missing something." "You think they have a capital ship?" Kyle asked. "I think they've survived this long by being unpredictable. Everyone expects fast hit-and-run attacks, so that's what we're prepared for. But what if they have something bigger? Something they've been hiding?" Amy felt a chill run down her spine. "If they bring a dreadnought or a battle carrier into this fight, then the fleet's in trouble," Daniel finished. "Those fast interceptors are perfect for chasing down raiders. But against a heavy capital ship? They'd be like gnats attacking an elephant. And that's where we come in," Kyle said slowly. Daniel nodded. "That's where we come in. The hammer was built for exactly this scenario. One shot against a high-value target that absolutely has to die." Amy looked at the tactical display again, seeing it with new understanding. The Defiant's position in the rear suddenly made sense. They weren't being sidelined because they were useless. They were being positioned for a strategic shot, whether the alien commanders realized it or not. "Sir," she said carefully, "if we fire the hammer in this fleet action, everyone will see it. The secret will be out, I know." Daniel's expression was grim. "And the galaxy's going to have a lot of questions about what else humanity has been building. But Amy, if the choice is between keeping our secrets and watching this fleet get destroyed, there's no choice at all." The attack came 36 hours later, in the middle of the night cycle when half the fleet's crews were sleeping. Captain Daniel Wright was not sleeping. He stood on the bridge of the Defiant, drinking coffee that had gone cold 2 hours ago, watching the sensor displays with the intensity of a man who knew something was coming. When the alarm started screaming, he was already in his command chair. "Multiple contacts," Lieutenant Amy Sanders called out from the weapons station. 60? No. 80 ships dropping out of FTL at the edge of the sensor range. Configuration matches Reaver raiders. All hands to battle stations," Daniel ordered calmly. Throughout the Defiant, crew members scrambled from their bunks and raced to their posts. The fleet channel erupted with activity. Admiral Zekthor's voice cut through the chatter. "All ships, combat formation Alpha. Interceptors forward, engage at will. Cruisers hold the center line. Rear guard, maintain position and protect the support vessels." Daniel watched as the alien warships surged forward like a pack of predators. They were magnificent in their element, accelerating to combat speeds in seconds. The Kryn heavy cruisers began a rolling barrage, their plasma cannons lighting up space with blue-white fire. The Sorrel interceptors darted between the Reaver ships, their energy weapons leaving trails of light in the darkness. The Reavers fought back with desperate ferocity. Their ships were modified civilian vessels, stripped down for speed and fitted with whatever weapons they could steal or buy. They weren't as powerful as military ships, but they had numbers and they had surprise. "Status?" Daniel asked. Commander Kyle Porter worked the tactical display. "Reaver force now showing 120 vessels. They're using swarm tactics trying to overwhelm the forward line. Our fleet is holding, but they're taking damage." "Distance to the nearest Reaver ship?" 400,000 kilometers and closing. "They're pushing hard toward the center." Daniel nodded. The Defiant was too slow to join the furball of combat happening at the fleet's front. Their weapons had range, but firing into that chaos risked hitting friendly ships. So they waited, watching, while the aliens fought. Amy's hands moved over her console. "Sir, the hammer is at 8% charge. Current power allocation has us at full charge in 12 minutes. "Maintain charge rate," Daniel said. "Kyle, get me detailed tactical data on every ship in that mess. I want to know which ones are ours and which are theirs, updated every second." "Already on it, sir." The battle raged for 40 minutes. Ships danced and died in the cold vacuum. The Reavers lost 30 vessels to the fleet's superior firepower, but they were exacting a toll. 3 Sorrel interceptors went dark, their life support failing. A Kryn cruiser took a direct hit to its reactor, the explosion visible even at the Defiant's distance. Then everything changed. "New contact," Amy said, and something in her voice made Daniel's blood run cold. "Single massive signature, emerging from behind the fourth moon. Size profile matches a Vorlak battle carrier." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. The Vorlak had been a powerful civilization that collapsed in civil war 300 years ago. Their ships were legendary, built for total war rather than the limited conflicts the modern galaxy preferred. A battle carrier was designed to take on entire fleets. "Visual," Daniel ordered. The main screen shifted to show the massive vessel. It dwarfed everything else in the system, easily 3 times the size of the largest Kryn battleship. Scars and mismatched hull plating showed where the Reavers had repaired and modified it over the years, but the core structure was still devastatingly impressive. "The Crimson Maw," Kyle breathed. "Intelligence reported this ship destroyed 5 years ago." "Intelligence was wrong," Daniel said. "Amy, what's our charge status?" "Hammer at 42%, sir." Admiral Zekthor's voice came over the fleet channel, and for the first time Daniel heard fear in it. "All ships, priority target is the battle carrier. Focus all fire on that vessel. Interceptors, fall back to defensive positions. We need to bring that ship down before it enters firing range." The alien fleet tried to regroup, but the Reavers had positioned themselves perfectly. The smaller raiders formed a screen between the fleet and the Crimson Maw, forcing the defenders to fight through them while the battle carrier advanced steadily. Daniel watched the tactical display with growing concern. The Maw was moving slowly, almost casually, and its heavy weapons were beginning to charge. Those weapons could tear through the strongest shields in the fleet like tissue paper. "Sir," Kyle said quietly, "at current speed, the Maw will be in firing range of the fleet in 6 minutes, and in 8 minutes, it'll have a clear shot at the support vessels, including us." Daniel did the math in his head. The fleet couldn't stop the battle carrier in time, not with the Reaver raiders running interference. And once the Maw opened fire, it would systematically destroy every ship in range. A priority channel opened. Admiral Zekthor's face appeared on Daniel's screen, and the proud Kryn officer looked shaken. "Captain Wright, I need your ship to engage the battle carrier." It wasn't really a request. Daniel understood. The Admiral knew the Defiant was too slow to escape if the Maw targeted them. He was essentially asking Daniel to commit suicide, to draw the battle carrier's attention and buy the rest of the fleet a few precious minutes. But Daniel smiled. "Affirmative, Admiral. Beginning our attack run now. Clear the firing lane, please." Zekthor blinked, confused. "Firing lane? Captain, your weapons don't have the range to—" "With respect, Admiral, you don't know what our weapons can do. Clear the lane. We'll handle the Maw." Daniel closed the channel before Zekthor could respond. He turned to his crew. "Amy, what's our charge status?" 68% and climbing, sir. Time to full charge? 4 minutes, 30 seconds. Kyle, I need a firing solution. Target is the Crimson Maw, current range 800,000 kilometers. Account for its current velocity and trajectory." Kyle's fingers flew over his console. "Target is moving at 0.1c, bearing 035 Mark 12. Mass suggests heavy armor plating. Sir, even with the hammer, there's no guarantee we can penetrate that hull." "We're not trying to penetrate," Daniel said. "We're hitting it with the force of a small star. Penetration is irrelevant." "Amy, how confident are you in your targeting?" Amy pulled up her calculations. Her hands were steady, her voice calm. "Range is long but manageable. Target is slow and predictable. Wind is obviously not a factor. Gravitational influences from the fourth moon will affect trajectory by approximately 0.03 degrees. I can compensate. Sir, if you give me the shot, I can make it." Daniel nodded slowly. "Kyle, bring us around. Heading directly toward the Maw. Full power to engines." The Defiant began its ponderous turn. On the fleet channels, confusion reigned. The alien crews watched the human ship reorient itself toward the battle carrier and begin its slow acceleration. "Are the humans insane?" someone asked. "They're running a suicide attack," another voice answered. "Brave but pointless. Someone stop them." Admiral Zekthor's voice cut through the chatter. "All ships, clear sectors 7 through 12. Do not interfere with the human vessel. I repeat, clear those sectors now." The alien ships obeyed, though their confusion was evident. They pulled back, opening a corridor of empty space between the Defiant and the Crimson Maw. The Reaver battle carrier noticed the human ship's approach. Its weapons began to track the slow-moving target. On the Defiant's bridge, alarms screamed warnings about incoming targeting locks. "They're charging their main guns," Kyle reported. "If they fire, our shields won't hold." "How long until they can fire?" Daniel asked. 30 seconds. Amy, charge status? 94%. 20 seconds to full charge. Daniel gripped the arms of his command chair. Through the viewport, he could see the Crimson Maw growing larger, a massive wall of metal and menace. Around them. Reaver raiders darted close, but they seemed hesitant to interfere, perhaps curious about what the foolish human ship was attempting. 98%, Amy called out. The Maw's weapons glowed with gathering energy. 100%. Hammer ready, sir. Firing solution locked. Daniel took a deep breath. Across the galaxy, in 1,000 different languages, millions of beings were about to learn something new about humanity, something that would change the way they looked at the slow, primitive species from Earth. "Fire," he said. The word was quiet, almost gentle, but what followed was anything but. The Defiant shuddered as every reactor dumped its full power into the electromagnetic rails. For a brief moment, life support failed, artificial gravity stuttered, and every light on the ship went dark except for the emergency systems. From the ship's bow, a cylinder of tungsten carbide launched into the void at 92% the speed of light. To the alien crews watching, nothing happened. Their sensors barely registered a ghost of a signal, there and gone in less than a heartbeat. Some wondered if the human ship had malfunctioned. Then, 3 seconds later, the Crimson Maw exploded. The battle carrier didn't break apart. It didn't burst into flames. The kinetic energy transfer was so immense, so concentrated, that the ship's matter converted to plasma in microseconds. A miniature sun bloomed where the massive vessel had been, the shockwave expanding outward and catching a dozen nearby Reaver ships, vaporizing them instantly. The silence lasted exactly 17 seconds. Then every communication channel in the fleet erupted at once. Captain Daniel Wright sat in his command chair, listening to the controlled chaos. Voices overlapped in a dozen different languages, all asking the same question in different ways. What was that? What did the humans do? How is that possible? Sir, Commander Kyle Porter said quietly. We're being hailed by Admiral Zekthor. Priority channel. Daniel nodded. Put him through. The Kryn Admiral's face appeared on the screen. His scaled features were frozen in an expression that might have been shock or awe or fear. Possibly all three. For a long moment he said nothing, just stared at Daniel with unblinking eyes. Admiral, Daniel said calmly, the battle carrier has been neutralized. Reaver forces are retreating. I recommend pursuit while they're disorganized. Zekthor's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. Captain Wright. What was that weapon? Classified, Admiral, but effective, as you saw. Classified. Zekthor repeated the word like he was tasting something bitter. You destroyed a Vorlak battle carrier with a single shot, from 800,000 kilometers away, while barely moving, and you're telling me it's classified? Yes, sir. Another long pause. Then Zekthor did something Daniel hadn't expected. The Admiral laughed. It was a harsh barking sound, but genuine. You slow, clever humans. You let us laugh at you, put you in the back of the fleet like we were doing you a favor, and all along you had that monster hidden in your ship. We prefer to think of it as our insurance policy, Daniel replied. Insurance. Zekthor shook his head. Captain, when we return to Zenith Prime, you and I are going to have a very long conversation. But for now, thank you. You saved this fleet and everyone in it. The channel closed. Around the bridge of the Defiant, the crew let out a collective breath they hadn't realized they were holding. Lieutenant Amy Sanders turned from her weapons console. Her face was pale but composed, Sir, the hammer's rails are degraded beyond safety limits. The system is offline. We're down to conventional weapons only. Expected, Daniel said. One shot was all we needed. Kyle, damage report? Minor hull scoring from Reaver fire before they broke off. Nothing serious. But our power grid is going to need a complete overhaul. We pushed it past redline during the firing sequence. Daniel nodded. The Defiant had done exactly what she was designed to do. Fire once, make it count, then survive the aftermath. Begin standard post-combat procedures. Get me a full diagnostic on all systems. And someone get engineering started on those power couplings. The next few hours were busy with the mundane work of recovery. The fleet regrouped, counted its losses, and began rescue operations for damaged ships. The Reavers were gone, scattered to a dozen different systems, their leadership dead and their greatest asset destroyed. But the real action was happening on the communication networks. The footage of the Crimson Maw's destruction was being transmitted across the galaxy at light speed. Every major news organization, military academy, and government office was analyzing the video frame by frame. In the Defiant's ready room, Daniel watched some of the early reactions on the galactic news feeds. Military experts were arguing about what they'd seen. Some claimed it was a new type of missile. Others suggested antimatter warheads. A few were getting close to the truth, talking about kinetic weapons and relativistic speeds, but most dismissed it as impossible. Ambassador Helen Cross called from Zenith Prime. Her face on the screen showed a mixture of pride and concern. Daniel, congratulations on your victory, and also I hope you're prepared for what's coming next. The questions? Daniel asked. Questions is putting it mildly. The council is in emergency session. Half of them want to give you a medal. The other half want to ban whatever weapon you used. Several species are accusing Earth of violating treaties we never signed. Are we in trouble? Helen smiled slightly. Diplomatically? Yes, but they can't do anything about it. We saved their fleet. More importantly, we proved that humanity isn't the pushover they thought we were. The power dynamic just shifted, and they're scrambling to figure out what it means. What do you need from me? Full technical specifications on the hammer. They'll demand it, and we're going to give it to them. Partial specifications anyway. Enough to show good faith, not enough to let them replicate it quickly. Daniel nodded. I'll have Amy prepare a report. Anything else? Just be ready. When you get back here, you're going to be famous, and not everyone is going to be happy about it. The Defiant limped back to Zenith Prime over the next week, traveling with the rest of the fleet at reduced speed due to her damaged systems. During that time, Daniel watched humanity's status in the galaxy transform. The jokes stopped first. The comedy shows that had mocked human slowness suddenly found other material. The memes disappeared from social networks. In their place came serious analysis, military documentaries, and more than a little fear, because the galaxy's military planners had done the math. They understood now that the hammer wasn't just a powerful weapon, it was a game changer. Shields didn't matter. Armor didn't matter. Speed only helped if you could see the shot coming, and at 0.9C by the time you detected the projectile, it had already hit you. The implications were staggering. Every major power in the galaxy suddenly had to reconsider their defensive strategies. Space stations, fleet formations, even the design of new ships, all of it had to be reconsidered in light of this new threat. Some species responded with fear. The Vel Collective issued a statement calling for humanity to be quarantined until they agreed to follow civilized weapons protocols. The Sorel Federation demanded an immediate ban on all kinetic weapons above 0.5C. Others responded differently. The Kryn Imperium quietly reached out to Earth's government about joint military exercises. The Thal Unity, a peaceful trading confederation, requested human ships as escorts for their merchant vessels. Even species that had barely acknowledged humanity before suddenly wanted to establish embassies and trade agreements. On the Defiant, life slowly returned to normal. The crew went through their routines, but there was a difference now. They walked a little taller, spoke with a little more confidence. They'd proven something important not just to the galaxy, but to themselves. Amy spent most of her time preparing the technical report for the council. She was careful to include accurate information about the physics and the basic engineering. But the critical details, the exact composition of the projectile, the specific configuration of the rails, the targeting algorithms she'd developed, those stayed classified. Kyle coordinated with the repair crews that would meet them at Zenith Prime. The Defiant needed extensive work, but the shipyard supervisors were treating their requests with new urgency. The slow human ship had become a priority. Daniel spent his time thinking about the future. The galaxy knew about the hammer now. It wouldn't be long before other species developed their own versions. The advantage humanity had gained would erode over time, but that was fine, because the hammer was never supposed to be humanity's only trick. It was just the first one they'd shown the galaxy. There were other projects, other programs, other weapons being developed in secret facilities back in the solar system. Humanity had learned an important lesson in its short time among the stars. The galaxy didn't respect weakness. It didn't respect tradition or honor or noble intentions. The galaxy respected results. It respected power. And now, finally, humanity had proven they had both. When the Defiant finally docked at Zenith Prime, Daniel and his crew were surprised by what waited for them. The docking bay was filled with people, aliens from a dozen different species along with human diplomats and military personnel. As Daniel walked down the ramp, they began to applaud. Admiral Zekthor was there, standing at attention. When Daniel approached, the Kryn officer saluted formally. "Captain Wright, on behalf of the Galactic Council Defense Force, thank you for your service. You and your crew are heroes." Daniel returned the salute. "We were just doing our job, Admiral. You did it well." Zekthor's voice dropped lower. "I underestimated you, Captain. I won't make that mistake again, and neither will anyone else in this galaxy." Ambassador Helen Cross stepped forward, smiling. "Captain, the Council would like to meet with you. They have questions." "I'm sure they do," Daniel replied. As they walked through the station, Daniel noticed how different the atmosphere was from his first visit. Before, humans had been curiosities, primitive newcomers to be tolerated. Now people stopped and stared, but with respect rather than amusement. The slow ship had fired once, and in doing so had changed everything. That evening, in a quiet bar on the station's civilian level, the crew of the Defiant gathered to celebrate. They were tired, battered, and facing weeks of repairs and debriefings. But they were alive, victorious, and no longer the joke of the galaxy. Amy raised her glass. "To the Defiant. She might be slow, but she hits like a freight train." "To the Defiant," the crew echoed. Kyle added his own toast. "And to humanity. May we always fight smarter, not faster." "To humanity." Daniel smiled, looking around at his crew. They'd done something remarkable. Not just winning a battle, but changing the way an entire galaxy viewed their species. The road ahead would be complicated, filled with new challenges and new threats. The council chamber on Zenith Prime was different the second time Ambassador Helen Cross entered it. The same 47 species filled the room, but the whispers and barely hidden laughter were gone. Now there was only silence, heavy and expectant, as she walked to the central podium. Captain Daniel Wright stood beside her, his dress uniform crisp and formal. Lieutenant Amy Sanders and Commander Kyle Porter flanked them, representing the crew of the Defiant. Every eye in the chamber was focused on the humans. Admiral Zekthor called the session to order. "This emergency session of the Galactic Council is convened to address the recent engagement at Kessin Corridor and the weapon system employed by the human vessel HSS Defiant. Ambassador Cross, the floor is yours." Helen took a breath and began. The Council requested full disclosure on the weapon system known as the Hammer. "Before I provide that information, I want to address the concerns that have been raised. Yes, the Hammer is a devastating weapon. Yes, it operates in ways that your traditional warfare does not anticipate. And yes, humanity developed this system without consulting the Council or following your established treaties." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Helen continued, her voice steady. "We did this because when humanity first joined the galactic community, we were told very clearly what we were. Slow, primitive, weak. Species that had perfected warfare over thousands of years looked at our ships and laughed. You made jokes about us. You put us in the back of your fleet because you assumed we were useless." Admiral Zekthor had the grace to look uncomfortable. "But humanity has one advantage that perhaps our long isolation gave us. We understand something that many of you have forgotten. War is not a game. It's not a sport. It's survival. And when survival is at stake, you use every advantage you have." A representative from the Vel Collective stood, its translator rendering its chittering speech into standard galactic. "You violated the spirit of civilized warfare. Your weapon leaves no chance for surrender, No opportunity for mercy. It simply kills. Helen turned to face the speaker. You're right, it does. And do you know why we built it that way? Because we saw your civilized warfare. And we realized that it only works when everyone agrees to the rules. What happens when you face an enemy that doesn't care about your honor codes? What happens when someone wants to exterminate you, rather than just defeat you? That's why we have the council, the Vel representative responded. To enforce those rules. The Void Reavers weren't following your rules. Daniel spoke for the first time, his voice calm but carrying across the chamber. They had a Vorlok battle carrier, a ship designed for total war. If that ship had reached your fleet, it would have killed thousands. Your fast ships couldn't stop it. Your elegant weapons couldn't harm it. So we stopped it with what we had. Silence fell again. Then a new voice spoke up. It was Commander Relka from the Sorel Federation, an older officer with multiple combat citations. Captain Wright, I reviewed the combat footage extensively. Your targeting solution was perfect. The shot was fired from 800,000 kilometers while your ship was barely moving, and you hit a vessel in motion with precision. That suggests extensive practice. We train constantly, Amy said. The hammer requires perfect calculations. We don't take that responsibility lightly. That's what concerns us, Relka replied, but his tone wasn't hostile. It was thoughtful. You've clearly been developing and refining this weapon for years. What else have you been working on? Helen smiled slightly. Classified, Commander. But I can tell you this. Humanity came late to the galactic stage. We're playing catch-up with species that have had millennia to perfect their technology. We can't match you in speed or shields or many other areas, so we focus on what we can do. We innovate. We find unconventional solutions, and we prepare for threats that others might dismiss. The Kryn Imperium's representative, a high-ranking official named Minister Dalvor, leaned forward. Ambassador, the Council must insist on certain assurances. Your weapon is too dangerous to be deployed without oversight. Then let me be clear about something. Helen's voice hardened. Earth is not asking for permission to defend itself. We're a sovereign system, and a member of the Council in good standing. We followed the letter of every treaty we signed. The fact that we didn't sign your weapons limitation treaty is not our fault. You wrote those treaties before we arrived. Then perhaps it's time to update those treaties, Dalvor suggested, to include all member species. Perhaps, Helen conceded. But any new treaty will be negotiated by equals, not imposed by the established powers on the newcomers. Humanity is willing to work with the Council, but we won't be dictated to. Admiral Zekthor stood, and the chamber fell silent. The Kryn commander's voice carried weight in Council deliberations, and everyone knew it. I fought alongside the humans at Kesson Corridor, he said. I also mocked them before that battle. I thought their ships were jokes and their capabilities were limited. I was wrong, and that mistake could have cost us the entire fleet. He turned to address the entire Council. The humans saved us with a weapon we didn't understand and didn't expect. Yes, it's frightening. Yes, it changes our understanding of space combat. But they used it to defend not just themselves, but all of us. They could have held back, protected only their own ship, and let the Crimson Maw tear through our forces. They didn't. They took the shot that needed to be taken. Zekthor looked directly at Helen. I propose a compromise. Humanity provides technical specifications on the hammer to the Council's military committee, not for replication, but so we can understand its capabilities and limitations. In exchange, humanity gains full access to Council defense planning and is no longer relegated to secondary positions in joint operations. Helen glanced at Daniel, who gave a slight nod. We can agree to that, she said, with the understanding that certain technical details will remain classified for security purposes. Acceptable, Zekthor said. The vote was called. After an hour of debate, the Council approved the compromise by a significant majority. Not everyone was happy, but even the dissenters recognized the reality of the situation. Humanity had proven itself, and the galaxy had to adapt. As the session ended, several representatives approached the human delegation. Some offered congratulations. Others requested meetings to discuss possible collaborations. The Thal Unity ambassador asked if human ships might be available to escort their merchant convoys through dangerous space. You're popular suddenly, Kyle whispered to Daniel. Give it time, Daniel replied. Once they develop their own versions of the hammer, they'll remember they don't like us very much. But he was wrong about that. Over the following months, something unexpected happened. The galaxy didn't just copy the hammer. They studied human tactical doctrine. Military academies began offering courses on asymmetric warfare. Strategic planners revisited assumptions about ship design and fleet formation. The humans had done something that seemed impossible. They'd changed the way the entire galaxy thought about war, and not all of it was about weapons. Some species began looking at other human innovations with fresh eyes. Human approaches to artificial intelligence, to resource management, to diplomacy, areas where humanity's relative newness gave them different perspectives, suddenly became topics of serious study. 6 months after the Battle of Kesan Corridor, the HSS Defiant completed its refit and prepared for its next deployment. The crew gathered on the bridge as Captain Wright went through the pre-flight checklist. Engineering reports all systems operational, Kyle announced. New power grid is running at optimal capacity. Weapon systems are fully charged and ready. Navigation has our course plotted, another officer added. We're cleared for departure. Daniel looked around at his crew. They'd become something more than just the team that crewed a slow ship. They were pioneers who had changed history. One thing before we depart, Daniel said. The crew has added something to the hull. I approved it, but I wanted you all to see it officially. He brought up an external view on the main screen. Below the ship's name in newly painted letters was a phrase that made the crew smile. Speak softly, shoot once. Amy laughed. It's perfect, sir. I thought so too, Daniel agreed. All right, people. We have a new mission. There are reports of pirate activity near the Outer Rim. The local defense force requested assistance. Requested? Kyle raised an eyebrow. As in asked for us specifically? Apparently our reputation precedes us, Daniel said with a slight smile. The pirates in that sector have been causing trouble for months. Local forces can't catch them, so they called us. The slow ship, Amy said, understanding dawning. The slow ship, Daniel confirmed, because now when pirates see us coming, they run. They know we don't need to chase them. We just need a clear shot. The Defiant undocked from Zenith Prime and began its journey. In the station's observation decks, various alien species watched the human ship depart. It still looked blocky and inelegant compared to their own vessels. It still moved with ponderous slowness, but no one was laughing anymore. In military command centers across the galaxy, human ships were no longer marked as low-priority assets. They were designated as strategic deterrents, vessels that commanders positioned carefully and protected seriously.